Folks, welcome to another episode of the Locked On Pitt podcast. Pitt, their National Signing Day. How'd it go down? Let's talk about some of the superlatives in this class, and let's talk about some of the late gets that Pitt got in this class. It's all coming up today on this episode of Locked On Pitt.
You are Locked On Pitt, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Panthers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everybody? Nick Faribaugh here with the Locked On Pitt podcast. As always, we're talking about National Signing Day. This episode, however, of the Locked On Pitt podcast is brought to you by Sling TV. Don't miss this week's matchup between any of the guys you want to watch on the bowl games. I know bowl game season is coming in Pitt in the Sun Bowl in a week, so make sure not to miss that as well, folks. You got the TV you love for a price you'll love. You can try it today. You got ACC Network Extra on there. You got Fox, you got Big Ten, you got all of the big ones you may want. But now I want to welcome in John Garcia Jr. John, welcome into the show.
Good to be back on with you, Nick. Happy post-signing day. We can all kind of take that sigh of relief and start to look back a little bit. So excited to do that for sure.
Yeah, this was a whirlwind of a last month for Pitt. It started really with Kenny Minchey decommitting, and then from there, Pitt just lost a lot of their commits. Bryce Pollock, Zion Fowler, Dadrian Zipper. I mean, there were so many decommits. And it's not like Pitt was losing them to equal schools. I mean, we're talking about Notre Dame, Clemson, Mississippi State coming to poach these guys out from Pitt. And then Pitt kind of had to restock the shelves, and they did. They ended up with a 18-person class. They were down to 12 as much as 2 weeks ago.
Wow.
So, I mean, they have restocked this class in the late signing period. But first of all, I just want to kind of get your overall thoughts of this class, the movement Pitt had and the ability of the staff to kind of reconvene and get 6 commits in the last 2 weeks to build the numbers back up.
Yeah, hard to deal with, right? There was a lot. It was like an emotional class, right? There was a lot of decommits. Zion recommitted. That's rare. That's hard to do. I think that's a good indicator of a stable coaching staff that has worked through, an offensive transition like Pitt has. So you understand a lot of that to a degree. And then on the flip side, you've got this other group of player that has just kind of stuck it out, just kind of stuck with Pitt through the ups and downs. So I think it says a lot about those guys. And while it was very much about responding to the losses, you withheld some other teams charging for other recruits that signed with Pitt. I mean, Shadarian Harrison, I know, and down in my neck of the woods, Miami was very much coming on strongly for him. So when that signature came in early Wednesday, I was like, oh, that's a great get for Pitt, because a lot of schools were starting to circle back on Harrison as kind of that it corner in the state of Florida, especially at 6'1". So yeah, this class had a little bit of everything. The face of the class moved on, as hard as that was for him and for Pitt to deal with. But everybody kind of recovered. You ended up grabbing another quarterback with a ton of upside, even though quarterback doesn't feel like as big a need anymore with what Pitt has done in the portal. So there's balance. There's a lot of skill position talent. Really like the wide receiver haul in particular. So there's a lot to like about this group and this class, even through all of the theoretical fire of a crazy on and off the field 2022.
Yeah, it has been crazy. And let's start right there at the quarterback position. Pitt has rebuilt his quarterback room. Keaton Slovis leaves. Nick Patty's going to leave. They lose, of course, Kenny Minchey. He decommits, goes to Notre Dame. Well, Phil Dracovic is going to transfer in. They get Christian Veilleux from Penn State, a young transfer. And then they get Ty Dieffenbach. Ty Dieffenbach, a UNLV commit. They flip him, kind of a 2-star, unheralded. You hadn't really heard about this kid. Then you watch the tape, and he's traitsy. I mean, he's 6'6", has a big arm, can run. I mean, this is a guy that is very intriguing traits-wise to me, John.
Exactly. You can take the time to take chances on players like that when you know the quarterback room is stable going forward. If you needed the guy to come in and play day one, you needed a Kenny Minchey type, right? You needed that guy who you felt really good about the floor. But here with Diffenbach, you take a chance on the ceiling. You mentioned the physical traits, 6'5", 6'6", big arm, good athlete, missed a bunch of time as a senior with what we think is a knee injury. So, yeah, you could understand Pitt saying, let's take a long-term 18 to 24-month chance on a quarterback like this, who, if he works out, we're all brilliant and better for it. And if he doesn't, it's understandable because that's just the nature of college football, and you go from there. So yeah, I really like this get, especially in a very short window of time. There were a lot of teams that dealt with quarterback loss that didn't have time to rebound. Ole Miss got their quarterback flipped, didn't sign one on Wednesday. Baylor got their quarterback flipped on signing day. Novosad to Oregon, they didn't sign one to reciprocate. Washington lost Lincoln Keenholz to Ohio State. They didn't sign one yesterday. So that is not always a one-to-one deal. We lose a kid, we go get another one. It's never that simple. And to do so across the country on top of it is really interesting to me. And this is a sign of both parties taking a chance on one another. Ty taking a chance on Pitt, and certainly Pitt taking a chance on Ty. So it could be a great story if it works out. And look, stranger things have happened in college football recruiting. Stranger things have happened. This was a quarterback year, particularly on the West Coast, that these kids were so identifiable so early. Your Malachi Nelsons, your Pierce Clarksons, your Jaden Rashadas of the world. So any emergers in California had to really kind of dig their heels in to grab some of that FBS attention. So in that regard, taking a chance on Ty doesn't even seem as crazy as it would have been in any other cycle, because he would have been a guy who's a little bit more elevated. That's not even getting into the injury, which always slows you down from an evaluation and recruiting standpoint. So I really like this for both sides. It's safe, and it's got high upside, low risk, high upside. Who doesn't like that type of gamble or bet?
For sure, and he put up really good numbers as a junior. So there are the numbers there, and maybe if he had played the full year, this would have been a Power Five commit long before Pitt came in to the picture. I mean, it could be one of those profiles. But Pitt also went out to California and kind of touched up their receiver class. Now, the Zion Fowler recommit wasn't necessarily thought to come. That was a surprise for Pitt. But before that, Israel Polk comes in. They go to the Bay Area and get a wide receiver, a guy from a really storied program too. At that, I mean, what do you think of Israel Polk as a receiver? Kind of a late add for Pitt into this group.
Yeah, 6'3", long, rangy player who he's got some nice finesse to his game. He kind of works like almost like a basketball player. Like you ever watch an NBA game and then you look up and this guy who you haven't noticed has 18 points and you're like, dang, I didn't even realize he was cooking us this way. Israel's got some of that kind of sneaky slenderness to his game, and he gets on you quickly. He can work down the field. He's very good after the catch relative to other guys that big with that long of a stride. So he's just kind of a big functional athlete that once he puts on the weight will profile as a true wide receiver one, physically, height, weight, speed standpoint. I like the ball skills, as you mentioned, comes from an elite program. I mean, everybody's already crowned them the national high school recruiting champs, or high school champs, not recruiting champs, on the field, St. John Bosco. So yeah, the pedigree is there. He played elite competition. A lot of folks will tell you that Trinity League in California, in Southern California, is the best high school football in the country relative to the competition. So to have been productive and head turning at any position in that league says a lot about the floor and ceiling simultaneously. Can he polish up? Can he add weight to the frame? Absolutely. Absolutely room for that improvement on top of that. So I like this on both ends of the spectrum, to where in a pinch, can you utilize him to a degree now? Yes. But will he have time to get better and develop and have an opportunity to be that classic boundary receiver? I think that answer is yes as well.
And St. John Bosco, I mean, that is a group that has a few other receivers that are going to go to a really
Yep.
good school. And Polk led this team in receiving, which is very interesting in that regard. Almost looked at his profile and was kind of surprised he didn't get more attention from West Coast schools even. I mean, I'm not talking about maybe the USCs of the world, but the Wazoos of the world, the Washingtons even of the world. It looked like Polk could potentially be a guy that could profile into those schemes, but Pitt comes in all the way from across the country and gets him essentially. And I think again, you talk about Ty being a high upside, low risk move, kind of similar here.
I agree. I think, like I said, you can use him now if you need him to, but if he can develop, this could be a really nice ACC weapon, a guy who can win on 3rd and 6, throw the back shoulder ball, all that fun stuff. But if he really clicks, he could be a true downfield threat and an explosive talent that you build some of the game plan around. Is he dissimilar coming out of high school to Jared Wayne?
Yeah.
I think that's something that you could really dig into just from an athletic profile standpoint. And anything in that stratosphere would certainly check the box for Pitt.
Yeah, Jared Wayne became one of the most explosive players in the ACC this year, and Frank Saint really put it all together. So that ends up having Pitt would be very happy with, obviously, the signing. I want to talk about a few other commits here, but first, folks, going to let you know about BetOnline because, folks, BetOnline is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends from every professional amateur league out there. That's from pro football to the college bowl season, basketball, and so much more. They've got it on BetOnline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, you can find it there as well. Folks, they're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, John, I want to talk about another guy that is staying home for Pitt. We talked about them maybe not having a single WPIAL commit. Well, Braylon Lovelace kind of broke that trend in the summer, but Pitt gets a second one now. And it's Cruz Brookins, kind of an interesting player that was committed to Kent State as much as 2 weeks ago, and then gets 3 suitors in Pitt, Syracuse, and Cincinnati all come in trying to get Cruce Brookins, who led Steel Valley, a local school, all the way to the state championship game, really carried that team. This is the same high school Paris Ford went to. What do you think of Cruce? I mean, this is a WPIAL ad for Pitt late in the cycle.
Yeah, you certainly like the geographical situation here. And look, I think there's a lot to like from him athletically. This is a kid who, like you said, he had to kind of will the team there, had to play quarterback, still played in the secondary, just a bit of a do-it-all player. And if you're going to project a do-it-all player with great functional athleticism at any position, you'd make him a safety, right? I mean, it's just the natural, hey, quarterback of the defense, get these guys lined up and get them ready to go. So when you're doing that at 6'1", 185 with success, there's a lot more to like. He is one that when you do take a closer look, you understand why he got that late rise, why he was a late Power 5 player. So for Pitt to have that in their backyard, I thought was a little lucky, but hey, that's recruiting. You got to get a little lucky at times. And this was a really interesting late grab, in my opinion. I think he's got some high floor athleticism. You see him high pointing the football with relative ease. He's physical enough with a great frame on top of it to where you feel like he could play balanced down the line. The quarterback experience rounds out the football IQ on top of it. The ball skills are comfortable, and he can really run. I think we see a little bit more on offense. It's a little bit more linear, but he can really run on top of it. So he's kind of this untapped, unfinished product that if it works out at safety, it's going to make a whole lot of sense, even beyond the athleticism, just kind of being that floor general out there in the secondary. There's so much value in that specifically. So to wrap that into a local package and a late rising good story, I'm all here for those situations as well. So Cruz Brookins could end up being in the top half, maybe top third of this class when all is said and done from an impact standpoint down the line.
Yeah, and you know how important safety is in the Narduzzi scheme, and they have produced some really good players out of that group between DeMar Hamlin, Eric Hallett, Brandon Hill, Paris Ford, of course. The last 4 starting safeties, they're all going to be pretty good, so Cruz could join that group. But I want to go to your neck of the woods, too. Pitt did land another late guy from Florida, from Cardinal Newman, West Palm Beach. Maverick Casino ends up coming to Pitt.
Yeah.
Again, a very similar type of thing to Cruce Brookins, where Kent State commit, Pitt comes in late. Charlie Partridge personally apparently fought for this offer from Pitt. What do you know? This is down in your neck of the woods about Maverick Casino and the type of player he is.
Just productive, man. Cardinal Newman's one of those kind of like Cardinal Gibbons, where they've also got some traction. Private school, gritty, well coached, going to play within his given role anytime he's out there on the field. But the production is crazy. 30 plus sacks over the last couple years. He's worked with his hand in the dirt. He's stood up, and he's been really a key player to some deep playoff runs on top of it for Cardinal Newman. So he's one that just played his way into more opportunities. You can't teach 22 sacks as a senior. You can't teach that type of production. And he's not just outrunning smaller blockers, right? Because he's not the biggest guy in the world, 6'3", 225 or so. He's not just outrunning you. He's working inside a little bit more. He's playing within his frame, and I think his frame is going to have some opportunity to put some bulk on there as well. So this is an intriguing late grab. If you're going to expand your board, go get productive players, right? You mentioned with Polk out at St. John Bosco, led them in receiving. Gracio, one of the best sackers in West Palm Beach, in Palm Beach County. Go get productive players who also have a lot of winning in their background. Help that blur the margins between early identified superstar athlete and then the late riser that you go grab. Don't take a chance on the kid who isn't productive and can't really figure it out. Take a chance on a winner who's got ultra production to his name.
Yeah, and that's just kind of their MO, Pitt's MO, of course, when looking for a lot of these guys. But let's go back to the class at large. You look at some of the guys in this class. When you look at the best players in this class, who kind of sticks out to you as those crowning jewels that Pitt should be really proud of holding on and should expect to be impact players during their tenure at Pitt?
Oh, I love this question. I'm going to stay in the state of Florida. I love Lamar Seymour. I think his floor is so high. He's ready to go right now as your red zone guy, as your 3rd and 6 guy, as your catch it over the middle, absorb a safety or a linebacker that's coming downhill to hit him type of guy. I think he's ready to go right now from a polish and ball skills standpoint. He's one that can absolutely go. On the defensive side of the ball, the more I talk about Brookins, the more I like him. I love Shadarian Harrison as well from Lakeland. I think he's got that length and savvy, and now the experience, having been really the guy on the state championship Lakeland roster. Speaking of taking chances on winners, he played opposite Cormani McLean, who never got the ball, just never went his way. So in turn, Shadarian Harrison all of a sudden has every team's best receiver on his side, and everybody's trying to make plays his way because he was kind of the new guy, even though he's long, lean, very fast, good track speed on his own. He's one that has developed technically into a rangy cover corner. And we know at Pitt, if that clicks, you can do a whole lot defensively. So I think he will free up some other players. We've talked about really liking this receiver core beyond Seymour and Polk. Zion Fowler getting a recommitment there says a whole heck of a lot on top of it. Really like the offensive line haul as well. And you've also supplemented it with great front 7 players, Neal and Bass. And, I love Antonio Kamen more than most. So this is a balanced class. It's got a bit of everything. You even hit the quarterback mark late in the game. I think you could probably, if you wanted to nitpick, say, hey, maybe one more DB or one more trench prospect, maybe an interior defensive lineman, players like that, if you want to nitpick. But, I don't worry about Pitt so much on that side of the ball from a developmental standpoint. They're going to have bodies. So this was a nice group that weathered the storm and found some really nice players very late in the game. And I think that's another mark of a great and stable coaching staff who kind of knows what they are. I know what I am. This is what I'm going to go get, even if it doesn't work out with the first plan of attack, because that's recruiting. It's as much about adjustments in the marathon as it is about these signature wins at any point in the timeline. So I really like this class. It's got a lot of gems, a lot of Narduzzi type guys, in my opinion, to where we'll look back and be like, man, like you said about Polk, how did these other schools not jump in here geographically? I think Pitt has made a reputation of that, and I think this class can help them continue to push that further, even with some pretty big misses out there.
Yeah, I mean, you look at some of their late ads in the past. Servassier Dennis was a huge ad, obviously. Eric Hallett, they went into Texas, got him. Haba Baldonado is a big one. I mean, they have added these guys that aren't 4 stars. Kalijah Cansey, obviously, is a huge one. He had the good offer sheet, but he's been an All-American, I mean, for Pitt. That's the type of guys that Pitt has really pulled out. Jared Wayne. I mean, we're talking about all of these guys that Pitt has been able to land. Israel Abani-Kanda, right?
I
mean,
was just going to say Israel too was pretty late, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was pretty late. So all of these guys, I mean, Henry Parrish decommitted and Pitt ended up going with Izzy. I mean, that is as much of a win as you can get out of there. So I mean, Pitt has consistently been able to do that. But now you also look at this class, and I think what was interesting was over the last 2 weeks, it looked like they were going to lose Shadarian Harrison and Jordan Bass, and that would have taken the real top off. Essentially, their top 5 prospects would be gone from the class from when they had committed in June. How big of the recruiting wins were, say, Harrison against, Florida State and Miami and Oregon were sniffing around Shadarian Harrison, and then for Bass, you had Virginia Tech, North Carolina, South Carolina, and some other schools, SEC schools like Arkansas, sniffing around him. Pitt fended the ball off, and they both signed on National Signing Day. How big of recruiting wins are those for Pitt, especially in this era, the NIL era, where maybe a school like Pitt that has been able to get some guys in the past, you don't know what their power is, but it seems like they've been able to weather the storm against those programs.
That's exactly where I was going with the Harrison deal. And yeah, with Bass. And these are out of region guys, right? It's not like it was a WPIAL or in-state player that you're fending off others for. Yeah, it was true with Cruz Brookins, but not with those other guys. So I think that's really where you're flexing. And I think if there was a side of the ball where you're going to feel better about that, it's going to be on defense. So I think those evaluations are trusted more by other programs relative to Pitt. So it says a lot. These guys, Bass and Harrison, could have easily waited and waited till even just Friday to sign, and their options could have changed and maybe multiplied. And if they waited till February, even more so. So that really could have changed a whole lot in their own recruitments. But I think on the flip side, when you're comfortable and you kind of know what you're looking for, you're good. You're done. It doesn't mean you're going to be disrespectful and say no to other coaching staffs when they want to come and say hello. But if you feel comfortable with it, you stick with it. So just as much as the decommitment and roster turnover on this commitment list became a story, like I said at the very top, retaining some of these players without the drama was just as big a deal, because we know that the priority level of some of these names increased while Pitt was marked next to their name as a verbal commitment, as opposed to earlier in their high school career. So that says just as much as going out and flipping a recruit late in the game to me.
Yeah, it's a big win for Pitt. I don't think the class is completely ranked on the recruiting services as highly as Pitt fans expected it to be after the ACC championship, but I see a lot of quality names in this list that are going to have impacts early, and I want to talk about that, the early impact of this group, and it matters more because Pitt is turning over their roster, the ACC championship roster, largely going to the league, going elsewhere. So there's going to be a lot of new faces here. It's going to be the youngest Pitt team since probably 2019, 2020. The veteran group, it's gone. Who are some guys in this group that you think could get immediate playing time, because there's going to be opportunities for that for the young guys?
That's a great question. I'm obviously not as familiar with the roster as you are, but just from a depth and rotation standpoint, you always need guys who can come in and play productively. So in the secondary, I think Harrison's one who might have an opportunity. I think intellectually, Cruce Brookins will have a potential opportunity. You always need pass rushers. So Kamen and certainly Gracio down in my neck of the woods, situational pass rusher stuff. That's something that I could absolutely see working out. And then you think of some of the bigger bodies. I'm not sure of the O-line turnover, so I'll stick to defense. again, came in as a pass rusher, Isaiah Neal as an interior guy. You're rotating D-line as much as any position out there on any roster and on any scheme. So you think those guys have an opportunity, especially as early enrollees. And I think Neal is coming in January. So as many of those guys as you could bring in the spring, it really enhances your ceiling to get those guys on the field early. But this class has a nice balance of depth and some star power. And I'm going to throw Seymour in there too. I think he's going to see the field some way, somehow, pretty darn early when he gets to Pitt for good.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. The receiver, Pitt's got 4 new guys coming in this recruiting class, and they are losing a lot of their receiving core. Now, Kadade Mumfield is going to be there. We're still waiting on Jared Wayne. We don't know if he'll be back. But Pitt's receiving core this year was thin as it is, and there are going to be some transfers out. There are going to be some transfers in, but there's going to be an opportunity for the young guys to play. You think Lamar Seymour could be that guy that steps up and becomes that, especially if maybe Wayne leaves? Do you see any of Polk, Johnson, or Fowler potentially getting on the field early? And if so, who of those do you think would do it?
Yeah, I think, when we see receivers step in, it's usually one of two things. You've got this physicality that's just undeniable. You're this gadget player, speed guy that just, hey, the coaching staff just needs to get the ball in your hands, or you're this physical presence that just commands attention with a catch radius and some contested catching ability. That's where I see Seymour making an impact. But if you're going to take a chance on a guy, I mean, Polk, the more we talk about it, it becomes more interesting to me. That frame, the catch radius, and then that kind of sneaky athleticism to where you can give him a jet sweep. He might be able to get a bubble screen and make some plays there. So I think Fowler will have more of that ability on the front end, but as you develop it with Polk and some of these other guys, it could become a pretty versatile group in and of itself, to where you don't pigeonhole these receivers as, hey, this guy's one thing, this guy's another thing. They can all start to blend together, and that's when you start to get a little creative offensively. So yeah, I think any one of these guys can get that first snap. I think Seymour's the safest bet, but I wouldn't bet against Fowler or Polk in particular.
And John, great stuff as always. Let them know they can find your stuff, follow you, read your stuff, all of that great stuff.
Yeah, all the content is up for free right now, si.com/college. And we're talking about it all day long. John Garcia _JR on Twitter if you want to catch me there.
Folks, make sure to subscribe to the Locked On Pitt podcast as always. And as we end it here, as always, hail to Pitt.